In 1943, April, Kitty Hartmoxen was sent to Auschwitz-Birkenau in Poland for illegal immigration, along with other Jewish people because Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party saw them as an inferior race. The days following their imprisonment were filled with daily conflicts to survive and compromise human rights, which now serves as a reminder of what happens when society turns a blind eye on people suffering because they aren't suffering. This all started in World War I when Adolf Hitler was corporal. At the time, there were many anti-Semitists and Hitler was no excuse. However, his hatred towards Jews wasn't large enough to want to rid the world of the Jewish population. Nonetheless, Hitler's anti-Semitism was influenced by many theories and people. On September 8, 1919, Hitler joined the Nazi Party. And then, on November 8, 1923, Hitler conspired against the Republic and was arrested for the failed beer hall putsch and wrote the book Mein Kampf. The president at the time was impressed and in January of 1933 used his power to make Hitler chancellor. Hitler wasted no time and started making Jewish life a living nightmare. He enforced laws made to compromise Jewish rights, leaving them starving and in the streets. Around the 1940s, many rumors were spreading about the notorious concentration camp Auschwitz-Birkenau. Many families tried fleeing in Poland or even Germany to avoid it. When Kitty Hartmoxen's family heard of Auschwitz, they received help from a priest who sent Kitty and her mother to Germany. Unfortunately, they were caught and sent to Auschwitz. On their way to Auschwitz, they traveled 48 hours standing in a cattle train. There weren't any breaks or food available to them, or a place to relieve themselves when necessary. When they arrived, they quickly unloaded and got a whiff of an awful stench that got stronger the closer they got. They later learned it was the smell of burning dead bodies. Kitty, her mother, and other captives were taken to the main sauna. There, they were stripped of any belongings and were smeared in a green fluid, and their hair was shaven everywhere. At nightfall, they were shoved into a wooden barrack and slept cold 8 to a bunk. At roughly 4 in the morning, ever since arrival, all prisoners were expected to awaken by whistle for morning roll call. Thousands of people were rushing out one door because they knew they could die for not showing up on time. If there were any dead bodies, they or an inmate had to drag it out with them. Selection didn't just take place on arrival at Auschwitz. It was a daily occurrence. In fact, any time the prisoners were together. If anybody at any point in time tipped over into that place in where they were no longer useful to the Nazis, they could simply be selected and sent into the gas chambers. Later they were to get in line to receive what they called breakfast, a small loaf of bread and coffee. There was a limited amount of food, so if they weren't near the front, they would have to wait until lunch to receive meals. After breakfast, they went to their assigned job. In 1943, Kitty was assigned to work at the ramp, a rail line in Auschwitz. As she worked, people arrived in cattle trains, which were airtight and sometimes left sealed for hours before opening. Later on, Kitty was assigned to work in the latrines. This was a place where captives usually threw to a seat used the bathroom. Kitty's job was to scoop out all the feces with a shovel and dump it out for the next bathroom. She briefly worked in the women's infirmary, but later on, for the next 8 months, she worked in the Canada. In the Canada, Kitty sorted out men's jackets. She found all sorts of riches which she couldn't keep because of constant inspection. One day, there was an uprising from the resistance, but quickly after, there was an inquiry or roll call. There, an SS woman had called Kitty's number and transferred her back to the main camp. I found out later that it was my mother who had managed to speak to one of the authority figures and told them I'd been working 8 months there and asked if I could be evacuated, and that's what happened. As Kitty and her mother got ready to board the train, Kitty's mother looked around and realized they were all dysfunctionary prisoners. So later on, when they had boarded the train, Kitty's mother made a speech about how they were all equal and how they should see each other as allies. After November 1944, Kitty and her mother went through 6 more concentration camps and several death marches. But luckily, on April 14, 1945, Kitty and her mother were released in Salzwedel, Germany. Kitty Hermoxen now lives in England with 2 sons and 8 grandchildren. She continues to tell her story so that no one forgets what happened back then. All started in World War I, when Adolf Hitler was corporal. At the time, there were many anti-Semites, and Hitler was no excuse. However, his hatred towards Jews wasn't large enough to warrant him waging war with the Jewish population. Nonetheless, Hitler's anti-Semitism was influenced by many theories and people. On September 8, 1919, Hitler joined the Nazi Party. Then on November 8, 1923, Hitler conspired against the Republic and was arrested for the failed beer hall putsch and wrote the book Mein Kampf. The president at the time was